It is a great honor and privilege to introduce Bernd Koschland. We're here in Hendon in London, and you were at Kidertransport. So Bernd, I'm so grateful to you. So if you could just relate how you became a Kidertransport and your background and the family history.
Yes, I will relate my background, yes. I was born in Fürth, which is a town in Bavaria next door to Nuremberg, in 1931. The town of Fürth, in which I was born, was traditionally called the Jerusalem, the Yerushalayim of southern Germany. It was a very Orthodox town, although in the German sense of a Yekka, as distinct from other forms. My parents, my father was, until the Nazis removed him from his job, was a representative for a shoe company, and my mum was my mum, right? And we lived in a flat in the town. Now, life, of course, for a young lad born in 1931, as I grew a little bit older and Hitler came to power, life changed for Jews generally, and there's little I remember of that. I can still picture the brown shirts in the street, and in fact I have a memory of Hitler himself, who was passing in a train either to or from Nuremberg, which is literally next door. Then the next thing really to remember is, apart from childhood memories, which any child would remember, of course I remember my parents as best as I can. My father was a very Orthodox Jewish man, and I learned with him. He taught me to read Hebrew using a method that he invented himself. Then instead of the old-fashioned books teaching you to read Hebrew where you get nonsensical combinations of words like bagada and dabadi and all the rest, he used German words in Hebrew letters, which made life much more interesting. And he would use, for example, say, a tet, yud, shin, tish. I would learn those three letters, and a tish is a table. So that was that. Then the next stage in life was the Kristallnacht, of which I've got memories of being marched down with my parents, my sister, who died last year and was 7 years older than me, Ruth, marched down to the space where we had to assemble, and there we stood while the rampage of the Nazis took place in the town, breaking into houses, shops, and of course, sadly, destroying the shuls in the town, which were, in fact, there were 4 shuls in one, old shuls, not steeples, going back, the oldest one going back to 1600 or something, and nothing is left of them. Eventually, women and children were allowed home in the morning. Parents were taken away. Sorry, not parents. Correction. men were taken away and assembled in a building in the town which was donated to the town by a Jewish businessman, and still stands. In fact, I was there when I visited the town. And the men were taken away to Dachau. Now, just as an aside, when I was in Israel a few years ago, or a number of years ago, we went to Yad Vashem. That was my close friend and her niece. And as you went into Yad Vashem at that time, there were cameras up above, and not camera screens, which showed you various scenes from the Shoah. But one said Kristallnacht. I said, well, I have to watch that, as I was there. And as I'm watching it, a picture flashed up of prisoners in Dachau concentration camp. You won't believe it, but out of that picture jumped my father.
Unbelievable.
I've got a picture of it inside. You know, it's, when I say jumped up, it is as if he was sitting where you're sitting, right?
Had you ever seen that picture before?
Yes, strangely enough, in the Atlas of the Holocaust by
Martin Gilbert.
There's a little picture about that size, which is that picture. But you know, when you see a picture like that, you don't stop to look who it is, because you can't see the faces anyway. Anyway, that was that. Anyway, Dad came back after a few weeks. He was released ostensibly because he'd received, so we informed the authorities, a visa to go to Paris. Anyway, he came back. And this must have been end of December, beginning of January 39. And the decision was made, if I can jump ahead, by my parents. Something has to be done. Now, the Kidertransport had started actually in December 38, when the House of Commons government agreed to let in children into this country on conditions that they came on their own, that they were under 17, that they had somewhere to go, and that there had to be a deposit of £50 for each child. Bear in mind that £50
was a lot of money in those days.
Was a lot of money. And that eventually the children, when grown up, if the war ever ended, would end, if the situation would end, would go wherever, home or whatever, which was never enforced, right? So a relative, distant relative, had apparently, so my sister told me, informed my parents that there was one vacancy on the Kidertransport leaving in March if they wanted the place. Now, they decided yes, and that was it. Now, I've got several issues in my own mind, issues how my parents must have felt to say yes to something like this, to let a child go of 8 as I was then, or just turned 8, how they must have felt. I know as a parent myself, if I would have to make that decision, I don't know what I would have done. But their decision was, we'll send him, and with promises. We'll see you as soon as we can, which is, you know, for an 8-year-old, okay, you can't see me next week, maybe in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks' time. We'll promise we'll come and join you. And to make it a bit sweeter, that when your bar mitzvah comes, we'll buy you a suit with long trousers. Now, for a child at that age, and it was, you know, youngsters didn't wear long trousers, they all wore, you know, shorts. Wonderful promise, you know. How I felt, I can't really remember. I suppose for me it looked like being a new venture, or adventure is perhaps better, of going somewhere where I'd never been before. I'd been away with my parents. There's in fact a picture here on my left of the 4 of us on our last holiday somewhere nearby. And so the time came for departure.
Bernard, this is the picture over here. I'm just going to... You know where you went for the holiday?
I can't remember where it was. It was a holiday somewhere.
And in the picture it's your sister and you and your parents.
Yeah. So that was a journey to be undertaken. How I felt, I don't know. Possibly, yeah, it's a new adventure for a kid of 8 who didn't understand probably very much of the situation. Now I left my father and my sister Ruth on the platform of Fürth station, and I went with my mother. She accompanied me to Hamburg to join the group that was coming to England.
Can I just ask, Bernd, do you remember...
Sorry?
Do you remember saying goodbye to your father and your sister?
Yeah.
It must have been very emotional to say goodbye.
It was. You know, I mean, I didn't know would I ever see them again.
And how come your parents decided to send you and not your elder sister?
Well, she came actually a couple of months later. She was unfortunately, she died last Hanukkah. She was 7 years older than me.
Do you remember what you took in your case? Or?
Oh yes, there are lots of things. For some reason or the other, I was able to bring a huge trunk, which still exists, not here, it's in the loft of my daughter who lives just down the road, and another case. And boarded the boat.
And when you said goodbye to your mother?
And I said goodbye to my mother.
That must have been also very emotional.
Yeah, and boarded this boat up there, the Manhattan. SS Manhattan. It doesn't exist. It was a liner running from Hamburg to New York.
That was on the 24th of March, 39.
Yeah.
And this is the picture of your
parents. The liner apparently allowed 80 of us on board, and we came to England. It's been a 3-day journey via France.
Had you ever been on such a ship before, or a liner before?
No. There were 80 of us, and I know that there were 80 because I've got the passenger list. us 80.
And did you have any friends, or did you know anyone else on the ship?
Now, I'll tell you what happened. I used to edit the Kidertransport newsletter for a few years, and I'd gone to speak to a group of people down in South London, and one of the people who was organising said, "We've got a list of some of the passengers on the boat that you were talking about. I'll send it to you." And in the next edition of the newsletter I said, "I've got a list of 30 or whatever the number was." And back came an answer from somebody in Oxford. "Is my brother on there?" I said, "No, that's all I've got." Anyway, within a few weeks, months, he sent me the other half of that, and I've got the list. And the person who did that, I didn't realize who he was. I mean, I called him by his first name, Gunther. He happened to be Professor of Law at Oxford, knighted and an honorary, in those days, QC, and well-known academic in law.
And was he also one of the Kidertransport?
Yes.
And he was on that ship
On the
as well?
same boat, on that boat as I was. I mean, I didn't know him, I'd never met him. All I know is when I said to one of my grandsons, "Sammy, you're studying law, have you read the book by," and I can't remember his surname. Yes, it was absolutely boring. Anyway, that's it. So we arrived in this country, a lovely journey, and if I can put it in aside, it infected me with a love for journeying by sea, right? If that's the right way of putting it. When later in life, unfortunately after the death of my wife, I became friendly with another person, and she and I would go travelling. We went on cruises, which, thanks to that.
And Bernard, can I just ask, when you were on the ship,
Yeah.
had you ever been separated from your parents before?
Had I?
Ever been separated from your parents before?
No.
Did you feel very lonely, or how were your feelings?
I don't know. I just, my memory has gone blank. Perhaps if I were to dig down with some kind of psychologist or something, but I was just one of the kids of 8, I think must have been one of the youngest on there. And I just followed the crowd, I suppose, and we landed in Southampton, and we dispersed, and a few of us from the boat went to Margate. I don't know if you ever heard of Margate, to a hostel there, run by Nabreth. And in the posh part of Margate, I've got to be careful, Cliftonville. And there I was in the hostel, and I was the youngest apparently. And there I had to settle down, learn English. I had no knowledge of English. My parents had taught me a sentence in English: "I'm hungry, may I have a piece of bread?" I mean, that was my full knowledge of English, which would have got me on a train from London to Birmingham, I don't think. Anyway, I learned the language. The one thing that I do want to mention was a Jewish hostel. It was perhaps more in name than anything else. My father had taught me an awful lot, Jewish-wise. And I think once I arrived here, my knowledge went down.
Did they have kosher meals?
It was all kosher, I suppose, yes.
And was there any prayers, or did they take you to shul or synagogue?
I've no idea, I can't really remember. I was one of the crowd.
And the school you went to?
Sorry?
Was it a public school that you went to?
I'd been to school in Fürth already for a year.
And the school in Fürth, was that a public school? A Jewish school?
Yeah. And I arrived in England at the end of March 1939. And by October I'd gone to my first primary school in this country, in Margate, I don't know what it was called, St. David's or something. Now, living in the hostel meant acclimatizing myself to a new way of life. And as a kid, I think it's much easier than a 15-year-old. And, sort of did things what children do at that age. I learned how to play hopscotch. Very important, You never know, I might have been a hopscotch Olympic champion. That's when we played with the older ones who changed the rules as we went along. I went to my first cinema in my life, first film, and saw The Wizard of Oz. Whether I understood it or not is another thing.
They say it has a Jewish theme.
Yeah.
The Wizard of Oz.
And sort of life started again.
Can I ask, Bernard, at school, did you get on very well with the other students, the British students?
Must have done.
And did you ever feel any anti-Semitism at school, or?
No.
And did they ask?
Not that I recall, because once war was declared and we had to walk around with our gas masks and identity cards, right, which is a sore subject over here still, for present day, I mean. All I remember learning, when the decision was made at government level to evacuate children from various areas, and as Margate was on the coast opposite France, and if there had been invasion or anything, or bombing away from the front line, and I was evacuated to a village in the Midlands, not far from Birmingham.
Can I just ask you, when you were in Margate, did you get any correspondence from your parents?
Sorry, yes, I did, and I should have added that. I got letters, and I suppose I replied, but then some idiot of a friend, if it was a friend, said, "You can't keep those letters once war was declared." And what did idiot me do?
What a pity. Wow.
And that was it. I have actually got a copy in here of a postcard that came just a day or two before the outbreak of war, that was sent to my sister. So we were in contact until then.
And how did your sister leave?
Kidertransport.
Do you know roughly what date she left?
What date? No. June, July.
And when she came to England?
She went to a family.
Did you have any contact with her?
Yes, we had contact. had contact with the family that she lived with. In fact, the man whose name was Bernd Gilman arranged my bar mitzvah later on.
And I just want to ask you, when you met your sister, you had been separated, and now, how did you meet her? Did she come visit you, or did you go visit her?
She must have come to me, and I don't know if she ever came to Margate. I think I possibly went to see her.
And do you remember that encounter when you first met?
An encounter that I went to stay where she lived.
But when
that
you
I
saw
do
her,
remember.
when you saw her, do you remember that?
Oh yes.
It must have been extremely emotional when you met her.
Must have been. Yeah. It was. I went there a couple of times to Streatham, which is South London. And then of
and
course,
you went by yourself, because you were still very young. You went by yourself to visit her?
Probably, I don't know. All I know is I was there. You know, my memory of these details is gone. But contact with my sister was in a sense broken when I was evacuated to the Midlands to a non-Jewish family. There were 8 of us Jewish children in the village. No problems at all about you Jews, you foreigners, you whatever. We mixed with the kids locally, and it was a lovely village life. Jewish-wise, it was not very much in evidence. We did have somebody who came on a Shabbat to the area, because there were several areas where Jewish children were in that area, and we'd walk over for kind of service, I don't know, whatever, and that was it. For Pesach, the only one I spent there, we were individually issued with a packet of matzot and some margarine, and that was it. So
do you know who helped with the matzahs?
Sorry?
Do you know which organization helped?
I don't know who did it. Some of the refugee organizations, Neighborhood perhaps, I don't know.
Did you ever meet with Rabbi Schoenfeld?
Schoenfeld, oh yes, many years later I did.
But not during this time?
Yeah, but I had no connections with him at all. I don't know who sent it. Jewish Refugees Committee perhaps. And the other thing I remember, Jewish-wise, not very much. It came to Rosh Hashanah that year, and we stayed away from school, obviously, on the first day. Our decision. Think of it, 8, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds making a decision. When the master, who was in charge of the evacuees of the school with which we were evacuated, called us together and said, "What's this nonsense about not going to school? If you don't go to school, whatever will happen to you." Well, we had no way of appealing to anybody, and I suppose we went to school on Yontif. I hope the Almighty has forgiven me.
Absolutely, sure.
But relief came when my sister, possibly distant relatives who lived here in Golders Green, thought they could find a place for me in a Jewish hostel run by the monks community of Golders Green, of which you've heard, no doubt, by the late Rav Munk, Zichrona Livracha. They applied and I was accepted, and I went to live in the hostel in a place called Tyler's Green, which is down south in Buckinghamshire. And that was a proper Jewish hostel, run on German Yiddish lines. Right? I'm not trying to be anti-Semitic, anti-anything else. Ramuk himself was a Yekker. The warden of the hostel, Mr. Bear, and his wife were from Frankfurt, and is a Yekker, 150% Yekkish. And we eventually had a teacher who also, I think, came from from Frankfurt. So that was the hostel. It was really from and Orthodox, and it renewed my Jewish spirit. And I went to my third primary school in this country. I'd been in Margate in the Midlands and here, and went to my scholarship to the local grammar school, the Royal Grammar School, High Wycombe, and I became very British, and Jewish-wise, everything was according to Kadas and Kadin. We had lessons almost every day in Jewish learning. Homework could wait. Shabbos we probably had a double dose. And that was it. And the one thing that I remember clearly from my days in the hostel, and I was now growing up slowly, I learned how to take a service as a Baal Tefillah. I learned how to read Kriyas HaTorah, which I did for years afterwards. And, Jewish life was in practice. Right?
And at this time, did you still have communication with your parents?
No, I'll come to that. Right? No, there was no further communication from my parents, as far as I knew. All I did know, and I think I only found out after the war, I'm not sure, was that my sister had contacted my parents via the Red Cross and got an answer. And she sent me a copy of it. I've got a copy of that here. And that would have been at the end of 1941, something like that. Because was it 41, 42? They were no longer alive. That we found out after the war by somebody who survived, that the people from Fürth had been deported, or some of them, to Izbika, a camp near Riga, or part of Riga in Latvia, and that's where they perished. And they told us what had happened to them, that they'd perished there, and for some reason remembered the outside dates of the deaths of my father and mother.
Do you remember them? Still remember?
Which I've got recorded, and I keep. Father's death was where was it? This, yeah, right at the beginning of the year. And that's it.
If I could ask a favor, if you could show, if I could just, because it's...
You'll have to unclip it.
Is this a picture
This is my sister and me.
But before, I'm going to just unclip this one. Because this is a wonderful, you've put together a picture of your mum and you and your father.
That's mainly me. And that's the older generation.
I'm just going to show it to the... Yeah. This is your grandparents, your father, your grandparents. And here you have a picture of your mum and you.
Well, sorry, I can't see. My sight is not good enough.
On the top left, there's a picture of your mum and you.
That could be, yes.
And here's your father, your grandmother, and you.
Me.
How did these pictures survive?
These are copies from my sister. She had these originally.
So when she came to England, she must have brought these with her.
Yes, and some photographs came also from Switzerland somehow.
And this is later picture of your sister and you. How old were you? It's a beautiful picture. How old were you at this time?
What on there?
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture of you and your sister.
I was a teenager.
And Bernard, when you heard the news...
Sorry?
When you heard the news that your parents had been murdered and killed, it must have been devastating.
I took it in my stride. I sat the traditional hour shiver, and that was it.
And you kept a very close connection with your sister all the years?
Yeah, I keep the outsides all the time, of course.
But you and your sister, you were very close?
Yes, we became much closer eventually. She used to visit me in the hostel in Tyler Street, Monk's Hostel. Then she joined the army. And when she came out, I saw quite a lot of her.
And did your sister remain religious?
Yes.
That's amazing.
She married. She married her husband. It's the most normal thing to do. In fact, I knew her husband before she did. He'd been a visitor to the hostel. And eventually they moved to Canada in 1951 and remained there. Right.
And did you go visit her? And she came to visit?
I went to Canada a number of times. Yes.
And Bernard, what happened when the war ended?
Yeah, when the war ended, life went on. War ended. The hostel had to move because the premises were de-requisitioned or whatever, and we found a place here in North London, and I was there in that hostel from 45 till 48. And that's when I first got to know Rabbi Schoenfeld, because I used to go to his shul. And I went to school again here in Golders Green. The beginning of, I don't know if you ever heard of the Hasmonean. Well, it started in Golders Green, and I joined the school in its year, what we call, I think, year 11 now, and took my exams and then left. Not very happily. I was not happy at the school particularly. I'd been used to very good English grammar school. But I got on, I passed my exams, and that was it. And went on hoping to teach French. Now you probably wonder why the hell I should want to teach French, and the answer is that's what I wanted to do.
Where did you learn French?
At school.
Wow.
I thought I was good at it. The examiners thought I wasn't good at it. So I didn't. In the end, I stayed with a family in Golders Green for a year or so, but I'm caught up with someone who called my foster parents later and lived with them. In fact, Finney was my kindergarten teacher in Fürth and came to England, married over here, and I lived with them.
What were the names?
Sorry?
What were the names of the family you stayed with? And
Zimmer.
Zimmer.
Like the Zimmer frame, you walk with. No connection. And I stayed with them, and very happily. It was really lovely staying there. I then went to, what was it to do? It was decided by the secretary of the hostel committee. She advised me, said, why don't you try to go to Jews College, which was like, a small training place for rabbis, teachers. So I said, okay. I applied. And when I was interviewed, before the interview, I had to read the booklet of what I had to know for the interview. Right? Can you imagine to learn Gemara and learn this and learn that and learn the other and know 2 or 3 pages of Talmud, etc. Well, I did all that. I applied. Chairman, sitting there, his first question to me was not what did the Talmud say in whatever. What sport do you play? I didn't, And I was interviewed also by the principal of the college. He said, what do you really want to do? I had no idea. I said, I don't know, I'll be a youth minister, whatever that was. Sounded good. Said, no, you're trained to be a rabbi. And that's how I got in and started. And at the age of 22, while still studying, I took up my first position as a minister rabbi of a community.
And you had smicha?
I didn't get smicha at all, but I was called a minister. And at the age of 22, of course, you know the answers to everything. Would you agree with that?
That's so true.
Anyway, I had my community, I was in charge of it, aged 22, that's right.
Which community?
It doesn't exist anymore. It went out of business some years after I left.
Do you remember where it was?
It was a very small Kahila. I think it had 90 members or something. And I moved on from there after a couple of years elsewhere. So that was it. And what else? And then I went into other Kahilas. I took over another Kahila, a larger one, and then moved on to an even larger one in North London. So up till then I was south of, on the river. Literally my second shul was, if you were sitting there in shul, the river would have been the other side of that building. But I got married there as well in that place. And eventually I got out of ministry and went into teaching, happily, what I'd always really wanted to do. Never mind about teaching French.
What did you teach?
I taught Limudei Kodesh, basically, biblical Hebrew, religious studies for exams. I was the head of house for a time, for a year, and general dog spotty in the school.
At which school?
The JFS, Jews Free School.
And you enjoyed it?
I enjoyed the first 20 years thoroughly. The last 3 or 4 years, not so much, until I was made redundant after 24 years. And I then went on to teach. Somebody found a job for me at a girls' school, a public, sort of a private school, the City of London School for Girls, which was in the City of London. And I taught them very, very happily for 7 years, Jewish children, extremely happily, until I had to retire at the age of 65.
It was mandatory to retire?
Yeah, we had to retire. In fact, I have here, where is it? Somewhere. Oh, well, where is it? I don't know. Yeah.
And when did you keep your connection with Munchal?
No, I never had any connection with Munchal, no. Because once I was in London, firstly I went to in North London, there I went to Schoenfeld's, Adas, or a minion around there. When I moved to Golders Green, I went to Stiebler, which wasn't my scene at all. And then when I moved further again to my foster parents in North London, I went back to a minion, and then it all stopped. What is interesting, and I should mention that, I've got the archives of the hostel that I was in, all the records, which came to me when the daughter of our secretary of the hostel, who passed away, Sissy Rosenfeld, had passed away. and they were clearing her goods. They found all the archives, and the daughter rang me and said, "Would you like them?" And I said, "Of course." And I've kept them. It's probably unique insofar that it covers the existence of the hostel from its beginning to moving to London.
It's historic.
Yeah, I've got it. It's a huge box. It's and it also deals with, the archives also deal with a girls' hostel run by the same committee, and the archives of that hostel, and the person who ran it and worked together later at JFS. What is also interesting, there was a move after the war to try and get hostels to sort of form a union. And Sissy Rosenfelder, who was the secretary of our hostel, was in contact. You've heard of Freshwaters? Well, the Isaiah's Freshwater, that's the father of the current ones, he wouldn't join in and wasn't from enough, etc. And I have got his letters, his original letters, of which I sent copies to the two sons, who couldn't have cared less.
Right. And Ben, can I just ask you, when you were together with Rabbi Schoenfeld, did he mention to you what he had done before the war and during the war, and how he had rescued, they said, nearly, maybe even over 3,000?
No, my contact basically was in Shul, and also he was the principal of the Hasmonean.
Did you know that he was very active in his own Kidertransport?
I didn't know at all, no.
And he never spoke about it, or?
No, not really.
When they asked him, how many people did you rescue, his answer is, that's not the question. He said, how many did we not manage to rescue?
Yeah, I mean, he brought quite a number of youngsters over. He put them up in...
It was even his mother's home.
In Queen Elizabeth Walk, somewhere in North London.
In Stamford Hill.
But I was in contact with him. In fact, interestingly, he once contacted me. They were looking for a new head teacher for the Hasmonean. He said, "You do. Come, let me interview you. Right, we'll introduce you." Thank God, nothing ever happened. I wouldn't have been a good headmaster. It's not my line.
And
that was my knowledge of Schoenfeld.
Can I ask, did you keep in touch with other Kidertransport?
A little bit, yes.
Did you go on reunions and conferences?
Yeah, we had, there were reunions in the first one was about 88 or something, and then I was on the outside. I didn't go. 84 or whenever it was. But after that, the chair of the Kidertransport organising committee, the late Hermann Hirschberger, whom I knew, distant relative, etc., dragged me into Kidertransport and joined their committee and was active on it for a time. I edited for 9 or 10 years their newsletter. I edited a couple of brochures for them and worked with them for a time. I've now more or less pulled back from everything. I'm not in a state to do anything.
And Ben, can I ask you, there were many Kidertransport that went to non-Jewish families from the very beginning,
They went to?
Non-Jewish families.
Yeah.
And they lost their they say possibly even up to a third. They lost their complete knowledge of Judaism. They didn't even know they were Jewish.
Yes. The answer is that a lot of children, and I use the word of, as a whole for the Kidertransport, probably disappeared as Jewish children, or perhaps they knew they were Jewish and that's it. I don't know what figures are. I mean, I've never studied
They
that.
say possibly it could be a third.
There could be a large number. I mean, people have written about all of that. It's difficult to know. I mean, there were roughly 10,000 of us. And by the time the end of the war came, where were the 10,000, right? It's a question. There is a book, I Came Alone, which tells the story of a lot of individual kinder, and you can see from there that some of them disappeared.
Did you ever feel, why did your parents make that decision in the very beginning, or before you...
Sorry?
Did you ever, were you ever, I don't know the right word, not resentful, but were you very upset that your parents had made the decision to send you alone, to separate from your parents, that they made that decision?
Did I ever hear about it?
Did you ever feel upset that your parents decided to send you alone and to separate?
I have no guilt feeling, if that's the word.
No, or were you upset with your parents ever for having made that decision? When you were young, did you ever feel upset that your parents made that decision?
They made that decision and that was it.
And you never felt upset that they made that decision?
No.
It must be one of the most difficult decisions that a parent can ever make.
The answer is that the outcome is that life had to go on. My parents never reappeared, and that's it. And I'm very much the person who looks forward in life rather than backwards, and active to do my bit, which I have to do, and I have been active in the Jewish community since my first job, and I've been busy in the local community around here also for many years in a variety of ways.
And did you speak to your children about being a Kidertransport in the war?
A little bit, yes. Yeah. I gave a talk on my visit to my hometown, and they heard a lot about it. My daughter heard about it. My son came with me to my hometown, and he learned some of my background that way. And that's it. There's this question of how do the second and third generations react. I tested Beth, that's my daughter, on this and said, there's no trauma there, right?
Because maybe it's the way that you imparted your history and your knowledge to your children.
Yeah, there's no trauma.
And when you went back to Germany, was it a very emotional to go back? And do you remember from your childhood memories the town?
The answer to that is, for many years I didn't want to go back, didn't want to know anything. But by some way I got an invitation to visit my hometown. I took it up and went back, and it sort of cured me, and I've been back to Germany 2 or 3 times.
And Bernd, if I can just ask you, what message do you impart to your children and grandchildren and to the future generations? What message do you give over?
The answer is yes, and I've said this over and over again. Each person has a little peckle on his back,
A burden.
whatever.
Yeah.
My particular peckle on the back was what happened to me, right? But that's on my back just to remind me. But you have to build for the future. What I did was, when I can show you this here.
Please, yeah.
I think. Yes. You see, I used to show this to children that I taught. Spoke about it. We must make this world A, and they have to fill in what these dots would be.
Oh.
A better place, and that this should never happen again.
That's so true.
And that is the message that I always give when I talk. You know, one can talk about the past, but we've got to talk about the future.
And can I ask, you always remained your emunah, your faith, did you always keep your emunah, your faith?
Sorry?
Did you always keep your faith, your emunah, your belief, you always kept, even having heard about your parents being murdered?
Yes, my belief is there all the time. It may not be as strong as my father would have liked it, but it's there.
That's wonderful. Bernd, I just want to thank you. I'm going to just come in, if I can just thank you. I'm going to just put this aside. I'll just put this over here. Right.
Shall I hold that for you?
If you could. So this was on your 90th birthday. Right. So it's been a great honor and a privilege to be with you.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to you.
Yeah.
And your story is just riveting. It's unbelievable. And you are such an example for all of us to emulate. It's just amazing how positive, and you went through so much, and you've remained, you smile and you're positive, and such an example. And your parents would be very proud.
I think so.
And this was your 90th Sa'ad Mavis Reem till 120 in good health, with all of Hashem's blessings.
Actually, I must correct you. The wish is now 119.
119.
Do you know why? Because 120, there's nothing to look forward to.
But
At 119, there is still something to look forward to. That's not my story.
It's beautiful. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you should just have mazel and bracha and all of Hashem's blessings.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I came. And thank you so much for just relating the most incredible story.
Yeah.
Not your story, your life.
Yeah. In fact, there is a book there of my life. What I wanted to show you, no, it's not important now, that when this is where we lived.
You're very modest. You got an MBE.
Yes.
Oh, if you could show that picture where you lived, that would be.
Sorry?
If you could just, is that the home you lived? apartment. And how would you pronounce the street? Kreuzstrasse?
Sorry?
How would you pronounce the street name?
The street's name, Karolinenstrasse.
Does it still exist?
Yeah, oh yes. Well, at least when I was there 20 years ago, we lived up the top.
So this, this is so wonderful. It's my story by Bernd, Koschland, MBE.
Yeah.
I never knew you had an MBE.
Yeah.
Or if you could just show, possibly if you could just page through, because you've got such beautiful pictures inside the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of those pictures you've seen, so, you know, the various pictures of my life. And if you want to start anything, we Koschlands are fighters. Three brothers.
And they were in the German army.
Yeah, West World War One. Dad, uncle. And he had the Iron Cross.
Iron Cross.
I don't know what for, but
I'm just going to go through, if you don't mind, because this is...
Sorry, that's my dad.
This is your father.
I just want to show you a couple of pictures of him.
This is a picture of your mother. Very distinguished.
Sorry?
Your parents were very, you can see, extremely distinguished. Very... Oh, this is... With your sister, it's amazing that there's so many families that they don't have pictures of their parents, or...
Yeah, I've got lots of pictures. Now, what I wanted to show you was something else.
Your mother.
Just to show you that we Koschlands are a fighting force.
This was your last holiday. That's the picture that we had before. And with your mother and your sister. Your mother and your sister.
There you see. There's the fighting Koschlands. The left is my dad in uniform, and on the right is my sister in the British Army in World War II.
It's amazing.
Yeah, no,
Bernd, when did you get your MBE?
2 or 3 years ago I got it.
And you remember your meeting with the Queen and did you go to Buckingham Palace?
Yeah, there's a picture of it there. It's the same picture, it's in here.
Okay. So this is your father in Dachau?
Yeah. Is it? I don't know.
Yes. Have you ever been to Dachau?
No.
I went, and it's awful. It's a terrible,
I don't want
place.
to go back.
This is when you travel to England.
Yeah, I never went. I didn't want to go.
You know, but these pictures are so precious.
Sorry?
They're so precious.
Yeah.
And this is your travel allowing you to leave, and it had a J on your passport.
Yeah.
Do you still have
Picture of my passport thing.
Do you still have the passport?
Yeah, I've got it. I've got a better picture here actually. One thing I haven't got here is space. Somewhere.
This is later at the hostel. And Brent, do you have a copy of the a copy of the letter that was sent to your sister from your parents?
Copy of?
The letter that your parents sent to your sister. The postcard or the letter that your
yes.
parents...
I'll find it
Finny and Nathan.
somewhere. This picture, which has nothing to do with me personally, this is the silver breastplate of a Sefer Torah. We were taken to the Jewish Museum, to the Israel Museum, by one of the guides who we knew, and said this crunched silver was found in the knapsack of a German soldier. So got a picture of that.
This is you hiking in 1952. Was Henry Fisher also Kidertransport?
Who?
Henry Fisher.
Yeah.
But he was a close friend.
He was a friend, yeah.
And this is when you were did they ever call you Reverend?
Yeah, they still do.
And did you ever want to get smicha, rabbinical ordination?
No, I never finished it. I couldn't be bothered. I found it
This is Hanukkah in Kingston.
too boring. Yeah.
And this is only with...
You see, here's that list or part of it.
Oh, this is the list.
Yeah, part
I'm
of
just,
it.
if I can just...
I wouldn't, I don't know, I have to protect it because...
I know, but if I'll just go, if you can turn it around a little bit, just... Wow. That is incredible. Wow. And I think you had from the Red Cross.
Sorry?
I think you had, this is your passport.
There's my passport, or a copy of it, a forgery. I don't show the original because I treasure that.
Yeah.
So I made a copy of it. Now there's the postcard. Two things come together. That is our last postcard.
Jacob Koschland. That's from your parents, dated the 29th of August 1939.
Yeah. And this is a good forgery.
It's a copy,
I made a copy of it.
you must always keep the originals and
I've got the original inside.
and to keep it within the family. So here you were, a civic service at Woodside Park with the Mayor Finchley.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is when you were at the JFS.
You see
And you're in the middle with the pale jacket. This is incredible.
the other thing is this particular picture. A smiley and a not a smiley. Which would you rather be, I say to children? Him or him? Right?
But you know, there's a Kidertransport in Yerushalayim,
Yeah.
who's a patient of mine, and she often says to me, when I look at a glass, I don't see it as half empty, I see it as half full. And I think that's what you epitomize.
Sorry?
She looks at a glass And she says, I never see it as half empty. I always look at that glass as half full.
Yeah.
It's her perception on life, that she wants to remember the positive, that she was saved, that she was with, not to look at the negative. Wow, this is with your wife and you. This will just be a minute.
It's
This is very special.
No, I just have to.
This is on Holocaust Memorial Day. And when you invited to give talks, you give talks.
I've given a lot of talks.
And this is the mayor of Barnet.
Excuse me a second. Hello? I'm all right. I'm fine. How are you? Yep, I've just got a lovely visitor here. Yeah.
Oh, this is
And what about you?
in Bell Lane School.
What are you doing? I can hear you, yes.
And this is your first day at school in Germany.
It's not very
With a
clear.
big cone of sweets.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Yeah, everything's okay. Now I can hear you I can hear you better now. Yeah, everything's fine.
And receiving the MBE from Prince
Okay,
William.
sweetheart. Yeah, bye.
Brent, can I just ask you, because this is very special, when you received your MBE from Prince William, was it? It's a culmination of recognition of what you went through, and
No, it was for my teaching of the Holocaust to children and so on. Have you ever seen an MBE? Well, we'll show you one.
here's with Johnny and Beth. Wow, that's very special. You had very special parents. Very. Oh. If we can, you have your MBE?
I've got it outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful.
Carlos, I'm just coming outside.
Outside?
No, not outside. I'm just going out. I just want to go to the cabinet. Is that really okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's an MBE.
Wow. That is so special. That is just amazing. And you can see on the other side.
There's nothing. That's nothing.
That's where it's made, but this is the MBE.
It's the MBE.
That must have been a very proud moment in your life.
It was.
If ever there was somebody deserving.
Sorry?
If ever there was somebody deserving, Brent, it's really you.
Well,
Oh. Well, I'm so glad, and thank you so much.
it's okay.
Oh, Brent, thank you very much. And you have, from Lord Jacobowitz, I'm sure you knew a lot of the chief rabbis. Wow.
I mean, I've never really taken it out and put it on,
Wow.
but
That's very special. Brent, thank you very much. And this is Jews College, University of London. And you got Khatan Torah from the Hendon United Synagogue. And from the Mayor of London.
There we are.
And if I could just ask you, you have from Lord Jacobowitz, from a memorial Sefer Torah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really go.
Wow.
It's over there.
Civic Award, wow.
That makes me
Freedom of the City of London.
Yeah.
Man, this is incredible.
I could know.
You are extremely modest.
You are showing my superiority. You cannot take sheep across London Bridge without paying for it. I can go free.
It's amazing to have freedom of the City of London. Wow.
This I'm very proud of, particularly.
Civic Award. And for interfaith relations in Barnet. Well, I'm so grateful to you, Bernard, and just may you just have all the mazel and bracha.
Yeah, thank you. Have you got my
So after you retired, you were a hospital chaplain?
I was a hospital chaplain for 20 years at a major hospital around here.
And were the patients, would they ask you questions or?
Yeah, I wasn't there just to visit Jewish patients. I became part of the chaplaincy team, so that I might have to speak to non-Jewish people as well. In fact, I did on 2 or 3 occasions. And when I say I enjoyed being a chaplain,
Yeah.
the job rather than the patients. But this one particular patient, I could tell from the way she spoke that she wasn't born in this country. I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "I'm from wherever it was. I survived from whatever camp, I can't remember now." She said, "I'm a survivor." I said, "I'm also a survivor." She said, "How so?" So I told her I came in the Kidertransport. She said to me, "You are not a survivor, you are a refugee."
No, you were a survivor.
But I survived because I wasn't there for what happened.
For sure.
Right? I liken it, for example, there's a burning building. People are killed in it, but you're not there because you've gone to the local pub. Right? You've survived. You've lost everything, but you have survived. So
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
But that's a debate that goes on and on and on and on. And as far as I'm concerned, Kidertransport are survivors.
Absolutely. Bernd, your whole outlook is so